Hi, welcome. In this video, I'm going to go over Program 5. So let's get started. I've already downloaded Program 5 and I've already started my project. So let's look at the instructions for Program 5. So in this program, you're going to do a grade calculator. There's some things about this program that I want to point out. So you're going to welcome the user with a family message. With a friendly message, you're going to have a menu, A, C, N, or Q. A to add points, Q to calculate the average, N to start over with a new student, or Q to quit. So when you select C, you can calculate the average. When you select C, you do not want to divide by 0, so you want to make sure that if the student selects C and the count is 0, that you're going to tell them please to select A. You can select C and calculate the average and then select A again and add points to the same student. The only way that you'll get a new student is by selecting N. I want you to assume all of the assessments have the same value and a range between 0 and 100. And in your adding the points function, you want to enforce that the user enters a value between 0 and 100. Also assume that they all have the same weight. So basically you're just going to add something, get the points for that as a double, add that to your total, and then keep a count. And then when it's time to calculate the average, all you need to do is divide the total by the count. So it's not crazy math. All right, so these are the functions we'll come back to, but we'll look at the sample output first. So you're going to welcome the user and tell the user that they all have the same weight, A to enter points, C to calculate, N to get a new student, Q to quit. So you're going to also use a student ID. It'll just be an integer, so it can't be a Z number because it's just going to be an integer. So each student is going to have a unique ID. So just to remember that you're working on the same student, but you don't start a new student until you hit N. And once you calculate the average, you're going to reuse those variables again. So we don't have enough, we haven't used arrays yet or anything, so we can't store large amounts of data. So you do the menu. If the user picks C, then you're going to say the count is 0. So be sure to tell them they need to pick A. You don't want to divide by 0. When they pick A, you have them enter the points between 0 and 100. So you can use a loop to ensure that they enter points between 0 and 100. This would be in the add function. And then you'll get your points. When you get your points, of course, you're going to have to add 1 to count. Then also to point out here, they can use lowercase a or uppercase A. So you need to accommodate that. Then once they send their next one, and then I'm just putting the student ID here on each one just to remember that this is the current student that you're on. And now the count is 2. So then if they say C, then you calculate the average, the total points, and then you calculate the average. So it's just basically taking the total points and dividing it by the count. We might later add to this assignment and have things weighted. I haven't decided yet how to do whether we're going to do that or we're going to do your final project on the food one. All right, so you just do that. Now, even though you're still on the same student, so you can say add again, and now the count would be 3. The only way you're going to go back to a new student is by hitting N. So here, eventually I hit N. So when I hit N, I reset the counts to 0 and reset the points to 0. So now we have a new student, and the count is 0 because we reset it. So now you can add points for this new student. And again, you don't retain the other student. You just print the results on the screen, and you don't store that data anywhere because we haven't really learned how to. We haven't done files yet, and we also haven't done arrays yet. So we're not storing that data anywhere, but we might add that in a future assignment. All right, so now we have calculated, and then when the user wants to quit, you hit Q, and that ends the program. So I've also gone ahead and given you guys a template to get started. I didn't put a a lot of information in this template, but I put some in, I put at least the function prototypes to remind you to put the prototypes at the top. And I gave you the while loop for the menu because I wanted to point out that Q to quit, it's a little bit, it's not intuitive to use this. So I will put this into my compiler and talk about the functions and all of that. All right, so let's take a look at the different functions. I really want you to rename the functions. I want you to pick your own names for the functions. So like function 1 is welcoming. Usually I would call that function the greeting function. And then function 2 is runs the menu. So you could, again, you should come up with your own name. So this could be display menu or menu function. So this function is going to declare, it's going to display the choices A, N, Q, etc. Declare, ask, and return that choice as a character. So let's just get started doing those two functions first. But before we do that, let's take a look at our main function. In our main function, we have our, oops, look at that. I named the variable menu and I also named my function menu. So that's not good. So I'll just call this display menu. You never want to name your functions and your variables with the same name. All right, so I have my display menu function, and so you have a count. It's going to obviously be initialized to 0. You have a points, which should also be initialized to 0, and you have your current student ID. So here you're going to greet the user, so you're just going to call your greeting function. Here you're going to ask and get the student ID. You could make an extra function for this, but you don't need to. Here you're going to use your display menu function, which is going to return a character that will be assigned to the menu. And this while loop is not intuitive because you would think while it's not Q or while it's not Q. But you need to use a logical and here because Q is going to make the loop stop. So anything that's not a Q is going to be true. Like if it's a K, K does not equal Q and K does not equal Q. If it is a does not equal Q and A does not equal Q. But if it's a Q, uppercase Q does not equal Q, if that becomes false, that stops the loop because you have a logical and. Sometimes it's a little hard for students when they begin programming to understand that, so I went ahead and gave you that loop. So you're going to nest your conditions inside of the while loop. So on the outside, you're going to have the while loop. Obviously, you need to get the choice here. Then inside, you're going to test. If the user enters N, then you're going to reset the points to 0. So you're going to say points equals 0 and count equals 0, and you're also going to have to ask and get a new ID number, right? So the first ID number you're going to get up here is going to be the very first student. If the user decides they want to have a new student, you're going to have to get a new ID number. Then you're going to have to add the other if-else conditions here. So you're going to have to add the else for A for add, and C for calculate. So those are things that you're going to have to add. But before we do that, we're going to work on the functions. And here I'm just printing out the count just to keep track. And here is the end. This is the end of my while loop. So right here, I need to, again, get an update for my while loop. So here I'm going to initialize. Oops. Here I'm going to initialize. The user is going to enter an A or a Q or an N. Check that it's not a Q. Have the if-else's here inside of the loop. If it's an N, else if it's an A, else if it's a C, else if it's anything else, you're going to say it's not recognized. Then you're going to have to do the update for the loop. Then this is the end of the while loop. And then you say goodbye and thank you. And then down here, you need to put your function definitions, which I, of course, spelled wrong. All right, so let's compile this. This is just what I gave you. I haven't added anything to it yet. Let's make sure that it compiles. It does compile. It has a couple warnings because we're not using any of the variables. And if we start it, it shouldn't, I think it just says thank you. Oh, it prints the count and it says thank you. Okay, now the reason that it's printing this right here is because we're not doing anything with the we have everything commented out. So just, we're gonna have to keep adding things one by one. So I'm gonna stop this video here and make a new video while we start adding features.